It was uncertain, it was unstable. And then suddenly, there was a revolution. We discover farming. And farming provided a stable source of food that we could control, okay? The word we use is domestication. Okay? Domestication just means that we bring it under our control. And because of farming, we can now create more food than we need. And the word we use for this is surplus. And because there's a surplus, people now could do things besides farming. So for example, we could have leaders, which creates the idea of politics, right? We could also have priests, which introduces the idea of religion. And then we can have creative people, which then gives us arts. And slowly over time, these villages grew into cities. And because there was a lot of people in our surplus, we could now have literature, reading and writing. So we can now store knowledge and then pass it from generation to generation and across cultures, okay? We can now have science and technology. And slowly, over the course of this process, we create modernity, okay? Which is the world that we live in today. So the pivotal step towards modernity was this transition into agriculture. And this is traditionally what we believed about the world. Unfortunately, there's no evidence for this, okay? And in fact, the more evidence we collect, the more we realize this is not true. In fact, what we now know is it was actually pretty stupid to transition from hunter-gatherer into farming, okay, for a variety of reasons. The first reason is that when you're a hunter-gatherer, it's actually a pretty easy life because there's food everywhere, okay? When you're a farmer, it's a hard life because you have to grow that food. So maybe as a hunter-gatherer, you're working maybe an hour a day, but as a farmer, you're working 6-7 hours a day. It was very hard to grow that food. So in the book, Sapiens, the Israeli historian named Yuval Harari, he's very famous. Sapiens is also a very famous book. There's a very famous sentence, okay? And the sentence is like this. We did not domesticate wheat. Wheat domesticated us, okay? So we thought that we made wheat, okay, the food wheat, into our slave. But in reality, wheat made us its slave. And the reasoning for this is this. Out in nature, if you're wheat and you want to survive, you have to make yourself attractive to other people and to animals, okay? So you have to be tasty, and you have to be easy to find. You have to do a lot of work. But when you're on a farm and you're wheat, you can just lay back, do nothing, and make humans do all the work, okay? So it was a bad deal for humans and a very good deal for wheat, okay? So that's the first problem. You actually do more work on the farm than you do as a hunter-gatherer, which means that now you have to have more children, right? You need to have labor to do all that work, which creates a problem of overpopulation, which means that you are using too much land, and then eventually the land becomes dead, okay? Or not arable anymore. So that's the first problem. Second problem is that we're able to dig up the skeletons of hunter-gatherers and farmers. And what we see is that hunter-gatherers are a lot taller than farmers. Why? Protein, right? Food. As a hunter-gatherer, you have access to meat. You have access to fruits and nuts and vegetables, okay? Your diet is varied and very nutritious. But as a farmer, you're eating only what you grow, which is mainly wheat and some vegetables, okay? So you're not getting that much nutrition. Then the third problem is that as a farmer, you are much more likely to die early than if you're a hunter-gatherer. Why? Have you guys been to a farm? What's the problem on a farm? Exactly, thank you. Pigs, right? Animals. They're everywhere. Plus, where do you put the garbage? Where do you go to the restroom, right? So because people are together in a very unclean place, it's much more likely to contract disease and then die. Okay? So for these three reasons, the transition from hunter-gatherer to farming makes no sense. And even today, we are not able to explain to you why this transition happened. Okay? We don't know why we did this. So the only thing we can do is construct theories as to why this might have happened. So even though we can't go in the past and look at why we did this, we can do some research and collect evidence and then create theories as to why this might have happened, okay?
Friday is company karaoke, 90s pop theme. And well, I'm something of a karaoke connoisseur.
What's this?
Brad wants a plan to reach a new quarterly target.
And he wants it by Friday? Trying to throw me off my karaoke game. Not gonna happen. I've got Grammarly. Time to brainstorm.
Perfect.
Let's build this out. What's next? Let's update my outreach messaging. Something engaging. Nice. This new messaging is perfect.
Hey. Amazing work on that plan. Can you present it to the team next week?
No problem.
Thanks.
Nailed it.
Hi, my name is Andrew Woods of Awake Window and Door Company, and this is why we choose Xometry for our custom manufacturing services. We are thrilled with Xometry's service and quality. Visit Xometry.com and start your project today. Xometry, where big ideas are built.
So there are 4 different disciplines from which we can collect evidence. The first discipline is called archaeology. Archaeology is just the study of the past. So basically you go and you dig stuff up and you see what you can find, okay? Maybe you can dig up someone's house, or you can dig up someone's skeleton, or someone's clothing, okay? And from that, you're able to figure out what happened in the past. And so 3 pieces of evidence from archaeology we will look at today are Göbekli Tepe, Jericho, and Çatalhöyük, okay? And these are places that we've actually dug up, and we know what life is like in these 3 places. So that's archaeology. Second discipline we can look at is anthropology. And anthropology is the study of other cultures. So in other words, there are places still on this planet where people live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Maybe in the Amazon, maybe in Australia, maybe in Africa, okay? And so we're able to go and study these people to understand why, or how originally we thought, and why we might have transitioned into farming, okay? So anthropology. The third field that we can look at is psychology or neuroscience. Basically, how the brain works. How do we feel? What motivates us? Why do we behave the way we behave? Okay, so that's a third field we can look at. The last field we can look at is primatology, the study of primates, okay, or monkeys. Because guess what, guys? We're monkeys. We're primates. 99% of our DNA are monkey DNA. So we can look at certain groups of monkeys to understand how they behave. And there are 3 types of primates that we look at very closely. Okay, the first is gorillas. We also look at chimpanzees, and we look at bonobos, okay? Chimpanzees and bonobos are very close to us. Genetically, they're the closest to us of all the primates. So by looking at these 4 different fields, we're able to collect evidence to construct theories as to why we transition from hunter-gatherer into farming, okay? So now I will share some of these theories with you. And again, what's really important to understand is we don't know what happened. We can only guess about what happened. So the first theory is the idea of coercion. Okay? And what this basically means is that there's an elite group of people who didn't want to work. So they made everyone else work. Okay? So that's coercion. And the evidence for this is that, well, guess what? Gorillas do this, right? If you study gorillas, you will see that they always have an alpha male. The male who's bigger than everyone else and who makes everyone do all the work. He just sits and naps every day, but he gets all the girls and he gets all the food. Okay, so gorillas. That's the first theory. The second theory is war. Okay? And the idea here is that if you are on a farm, it's easier to protect yourself in a time of war than you're out in the forest, right? You can build walls around your farm. You can defend yourself a lot easier. You can see the enemy coming. Okay, so war. The evidence for this is that chimpanzees, okay, again, who are like us, they go to war a lot. They're very violent. They're always fighting each other. So the argument here is that we human beings are just a violent people who are always at war, and we must be afraid of each other, and therefore, when we have the chance, we'll settle down, build fortifications, build walls, and fight each other, okay? That's the second theory. And again, the evidence for this are chimpanzees. The third theory is respect for elders, meaning that as a hunter-gatherer, it's very hard on old people, right? So at a certain point, you're going to have to leave the old people to just stay there and die. And maybe we as human beings, we are biologically programmed to take care of elders for whatever reason, okay? And again, the evidence for this is anthropology, where every culture respects its elders, right? So that's a third theory. The last theory is religion, okay? Meaning that we settle down in order to celebrate a religion, to practice a religion. And just to be clear, there's evidence and arguments for all four theories, and there are scholars who argued for different theories, okay? But the consensus, what most people agree on today, okay, most scholars, not every scholar, but most scholars is religion, okay? So let me explain why we think the answer has to be religion, slowly. All right, okay. So, coercion. While it is true that with gorillas, there's an alpha male who controls everything, the problem is that if you look at gorillas, the alpha male is huge, okay? And males are a lot bigger than females. So it's possible for one gorilla to exert force and pressure on the others, okay? With human beings, that's harder, right? Because let's just say a 9-foot giant human being comes into this room and it's like, I'm now your boss, you have to grow food for me, you have to give me all your woman, okay? What can we do as a class? Beat the crap out of him, okay? You understand? Because we have big brains. And these big brains allow us to cooperate together, okay? So this guy's around, and at first we're afraid of him, so we let him do whatever he wants. But then he goes to bed, and then we as a class discuss, hey, what can we do? Well, we can make weapons, right? Or we can trap him, or we can trick him. We can give him poison food, okay? So coercion among humans is very, very hard to do. The worst case scenario, we can't beat him up. What we'll do is just run away. Okay? Does that make sense? So we don't think coercion is an explanation because there's so many ways for us to fight back and to rebel against bigger people, okay? So coercion doesn't really work. War. Okay, so we don't think war is a good explanation either. So it is true that chimpanzees are naturally violent, okay? They're always beating the crap out of each other. But guess what? Bonobos, who are actually closer to us genetically than chimpanzees, they're actually very peaceful. They don't fight each other, okay? So there's no evidence that we human beings are naturally violent. Also, if it is war, then we should be able to find weapons. And we don't really find weapons, okay? In archaeology, we don't really find weapons of early humans. Now, there is a lot of violence in early human history, okay? There's human sacrifice, there's group burials where a group of people are killed, but that's basically violence within a group. We don't find evidence of large violence among different groups, okay?